Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another recorded book discussion with the Unerased Book Club. The book that we are going to be discussing tonight is called The World of Wonders: In Praise of Fireflies, Whale Sharks, and Other Astonishments. And this is by Aimee Nezhukumatathil. And before we start, maybe we can all introduce ourselves. My name is Lucy, and I work as a library tech at the library in the youth department, and I also do adult programming as well. I am a 50-year-old female with white skin and brown hair, and I'm sitting in front of a wall of watercolors.
Hello, my name is Amanda. I'm also a library technician in the youth department. I am a middle-aged white female with medium-length dark brown hair, dark brown glasses, white skin, bright pink lipstick, and I am sitting in front of a navy blue couch.
I'm Elizabeth. I'm a library technician in the archives department at the library, and I am a 30-ish-year-old woman with white skin and dark brown hair pulled back into a ponytail. I have some tealish colored glasses on, a patterned shirt, and I'm sitting in front of a blank wall with some plants in the background.
And I'm Jacob. I'm also a library tech. I'm working in the outreach department. I am a 28-year-old male with a blonde beard, short blonde hair, blue eyes, and I'm sitting in front of a white wall.
And I'm Krista, and I'm a library desk clerk. And I'm a 40-year-old female with white skin, and my blonde and blue hair is pulled back into a ponytail, and my background is blurry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Fatema Haque. I am a brown-skinned South Asian woman, and I have a blurred background. I am a facilitator for the Unerased Book Club. We read Asian American authors, and we read across a wide variety of genres. And this month's book, World of Wonders, is a collection of nature writing and essays and a little bit personal memoir. So lots of interesting things to dig into. We always love to start our conversation with, what did you think of the book? And we'd love to hear from folks.
I loved it. This was my second reading of this book, and I feel like I just enjoyed it even more this time. There's so much in it, like the nature writing, but also you can tell that she's a poet, that writing just, can't stay out of there. And the way that she meshes her personal narratives with the nature writing is just, I've not really read anything like it. So I really love it.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't read anything like it either. And you can definitely tell she's a poet. It's very beautifully written. And I thought it was a very interesting approach to do a memoir, but also nature writing, because everything is illustrated beautifully. And I hadn't seen a memoir approached in that way, but I really did like that approach. I thought that was really interesting and kind of inspiring, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also loved the book. I read a lot of it while sitting outside, which was kind of fun to hear birds. And I have a giant catalpa tree in my backyard. And so opening up that first chapter, I looked at the book, looked up at my tree, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to love every minute of this. And I did. I loved the language. I also loved that she was a child of the 80s. Some of those references I really related to. And I loved how it was not chronological and how it had stories of her childhood and then like adulthood and then her, being a mother to her young sons. So much of the book, I just lapped it up. I thought it was wonderful. And I haven't read a lot of nonfiction about nature recently. So I was very happy to read it. And it was written in such a beautiful, poetic, accessible way. And I could think of like 4 people I want to buy this book for as a gift. It's just a wonderful, wonderful book. And the illustrations just like took it to the next level. So great.
Not the illustrations, and of course the writing as well, were amazing. There's something about the illustrations, kind of the nature of it being short bits about nature and herself, that made the book kind of feel like a small little treasure. I loved the book, but I also quite literally loved the book.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that made it really exciting to read. Something I really appreciated was I kind of feel like learning about the world around you makes your life more interesting. And the way that she learns about nature and shares that information with us and how she relates it to her personal life, I'm just like, I really dig that. I would like to see the world more like that, and myself kind of more like that.
I also really liked the physical book. Like it's a nice size and the illustrations are really nice, like full color in here. I tried to read it. I had the staff copy that we have, and I tried to read it on my computer, and I was like, no, obviously I saw the first illustration of the CATALPATREE and was like, I need the physical copy. And I found myself like disappointed if there wasn't an illustration starting out like an animal chapter. But yeah, just to resonate with what everyone else said, I really enjoyed the stylistic qualities that she used throughout with the poetry. Well, not like explicit poetry, but poetic voice is definitely clear there. And just the illustrations and the subject matter. I kind of had a similar childhood like with nature, so I really related to that a lot, and I really enjoyed it.
It's so so lovely. I have to agree with everything that you all have said in terms of like the accessibility and the language, as well as like the beauty of the book. Parts of this I actually read with my niece, and she's 5 years old. And I mean, we saw the pictures, like the dancing frog, and she was just like, well, why are they dancing on their feet? And like those types of questions. And it reminded me of, in some ways, of some of the chapters where she's interacting with her children and kind of describing to them different types of birds and bird habits or butterflies or whatever the case may be. And I was just like, oh yeah, this is part of the sharing of the nature writing. And it made me think a lot about the nature that I grew up with, or that surrounds me, that I don't know the names of, which I think it's something we came across before in a previous book. But it was just, the title is so apt. It was like full of wonder and full of astonishments and a lot of delight, I thought, which is really, really lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say another part of the title too is I think that she inspires you to wonder. I felt like I know there are things in nature that excite me that I want to learn more about, that would instill wonder in me. And so I kind of got that out of the title too.
Yeah.
I also think too, with observing so much nature, she had the experience of moving all over the country and experiencing other countries where she was able to be in different habitats and environments to compare with the changes in her life and how her family structure was, and how her family was immigrants. And then just so many pieces she was able to like just lace together, which I thought was, you could have made this book if an author had like a singular experience in like growing up in one state or one country, but here was a multitude of like habitats to observe and wonder about.
Yeah. It was actually quite astonishing to me that one person could move around between so many different states and countries. And I was like, oh, she just randomly dropped. I was teaching at Oxford. I was in, Australia or whatever the case, like wherever she was. And I would just be like, what kind of a life are you living? And can we get the details on how to make that happen? So it was just remarkable, really. Yeah.
She also had the honor of having these parents who like supported and encouraged her to be outside all the time and to observe nature, and how her parents had their special love language was gardening. And she was really lucky in that respect to like live in so many places and still have that relationship with her family and with nature.
Yeah, I really liked that she was talking about how like when she was a teenager, she didn't want to do any of these things, like go on these hikes and stuff with her dad, but she's really happy now that she did it, and like feels that that's a huge impact on the way she views things and approaches nature and the world. So I thought that was really touching.
So a lot of you brought up the poetic language in the book. Were there any like striking things that really resonated, or certain elements that intertwine with the memoir part of this book that you observed?
I have just some like specific language, like a lot of the first sentences I felt, like she says about the firefly, when the first glimmer pop of firefly light appears on a summer night. I always want to call my mother just to say hello. The bibliography, of the firefly is a tender and electric dress. It's just, like the words she chooses. I don't know. I just felt like the intro into most of these essays felt very much like the start of a poem for me.
Yeah.
So.
I don't have any like specific examples. I was hoping maybe one of my little bookmarks had something, but no. But I just felt like I kept noticing like she would incorporate the other senses into descriptions, like describing how something might like taste or smell, when that might not be what you would think about when you think about what she's talking about, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I interrupted one. The smell of the corpse flower was particularly like astonishing to me because I'd never thought about it or had heard of this flower before. The smell is basically what I imagine emanates from the bottom of a used diaper pail left out in the late August sun after someone has also emptied a tin of sardines and a bottle of blue cheese salad dressing on top and left it there to sit for a day or three. And yeah.
I read that out loud to my husband when I got to that passage.
Yeah, it's so descriptive though. It's so descriptive. It's so visceral. You are there. You are smelling that flower.
Yeah.
I really like that whole story of her like traveling around to see the different flowers blooming.
I know, and how she realized like this was the man, right, for her, because he was like, "Yep, I'm with you there." I listened to this interview that she did with Casey Lehman, who's an essayist and author who teaches at the same university that she does, and she was saying that a lot of these started out as poems, but she had this line. She said she couldn't stand the tyranny of the line break. Like it was just too stifling for her to put this into poems. So she said, you might see, like, you might feel like you're getting snippets of poems, but I had to break out of it. I just thought that was really interesting. And I wanted to make sure I shared it because I love that, like the tyranny of the line break, and how this writing would have been so different had she stuck to a more traditional poetic form.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that feels like if these short reflections were presented as poems, it would take a little bit of the accessibility of the book away, almost. And I think that one of the many strengths of this book is that it produces such a feeling of warmth and joy and nostalgia that really not too many other pieces of art are interested in. Just makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would make me feel as good if these particular ideas were dressed as poems.
Yeah, as I was
if
reading
that makes
this,
any sense.
It does. It absolutely does. Because the word that I kept coming back to again and again as I was reading this was, this feels very tender, like very precious and tender to me. And yeah, just lovely in that way.
For me, I was too reading it. I didn't even think about it being in poem form. For me, they were like little stories. She was giving me a glimpse into a story of something that happened to her, like just a glimpse, because they were all pretty. There was a lot of essays, and they're all pretty short. Like a lot of them are just like 3 to 5 pages, and I love that they were just a story. Just like I could hear that sing-songy voice, just wooing me into like calmness with this like story about her childhood and the peacock. But then you're filled with, it's just magical. So I do think I think her poetic background definitely gave license and leeway to so much of the beautiful language. But I think that the form of the essay is better for this, like such lush content. There's more of her just telling us exactly what to see and what to visualize and what to smell, rather than us trying to sort of figure it out or piece it together. We're more just like, we open the door and we're in the middle of like a green meadow.
And even instructions on how to reflect on it, right? And especially towards the end of the book, I feel like she has a lot more direct conversation with the reader, where she addresses the reader and asks you questions to think about as well. Yeah.
You mentioned a second ago, like any language or lines that we had written, and like for me,
yeah,
there were too many. There were so many, so I didn't even jot down one. And usually when I write or when I'm reading something, I'll jot down a few that stand out. And for this one, it was like all of it. But the thing you just mentioned about questions, one of the only things I bookmarked was page 137, where she starts to ask the question about dancing. When is the last time you danced like a superb bird of paradise? I mean, when was the last time you really cut a rug, and did you mosh, bust a move, cavort, frisk, frolic, skip, prance? And there's all of these words for dance. And she's asking you that question and challenging you. Have you? Did you? Why not? And I thought that was really cool, because and I think it's impactful too, that it's towards the end. You've got this whole book to digest, and now she's like poking at you. Hey, when are you going to go look at those fireflies?
Yeah, there's definitely a call to action in this book. Yeah. I want to go back to the peacock reference there, because I think that was one of the things that this book does, is really explores her identity as a multiracial person, a person of color in this country. So her parents are Filipino and South Indian. And because she grew up all over the place, that she had a variety of experiences in terms of how she was received as an Asian American person. And the peacock was a really big symbol of that, in terms of she draws it for a class, and it does not, the teacher is quite offensive about how un-American it is. And so I'm curious about like what your thoughts were on her experiences of being like growing up in America, because she keeps coming back to it, or even just living in America, even as an adult, because she keeps coming back to it over and over again.
I thought the peacock thing was like I put a bookmark there. I was appalled when I read it. I was like, what the heck is wrong with this teacher? And I thought, my first question was like, okay, she listed a puppy and a kitten and a lizard, like all these things that are not native animals to America. Like that wasn't the assignment. So yeah, it's clear the teacher was just picking on her. And then like the way that she handled it was amazing. She drew this like absolutely ridiculous cartoonish thing that she thought was awful, and it probably was. And like it was probably beautifully like drawn, but like what it stands for and like the situation that she had to experience was terrible. And it ended up winning an award. And I just thought that was like so funny and ironic. And she consistently comments on the peacock throughout the book. Like she has peacock colored paper, and her son's favorite color is like a similar shade. And it's to answer your actual question about how she's like adapting to these environments. It seems like in every situation she moves a lot, so she's always trying to kind of get new friends and like adapt to these new environments. And it depends where she goes, whether or not it's a more diverse or less diverse environment for her. But it seems like she has to just like navigate these situations and really like get to know people before she puts trust in them, because she finds over and over that people she thought were her friends actually will just say something really racist to her suddenly with no warning. So it seems like she's really learning how to navigate and trust people based on experiences that she's had.
Well, I thought it was interesting too. The different places she lived were different. Like the people that lived there were different, but I mean, there's Arizona, Western New York, Mississippi, Florida, Ohio. These are all extremely different, like physical environments, and then also people environments.
There's a little snippet in the Peacock chapter, which I also think came up again, which seems to be sort of reflective of being a child of immigrants, when her teacher's reaction to her drawing is she comes home and she's angry at her parents because they have peacocks everywhere. And she's just like, why? It's like, you're not doing it right. You're not being American enough because you have these peacocks. And you see it again, or I don't know if it's before or after, when someone's telling her lipstick shade is wrong because of the color of her skin. And she's just kind of like, she wants to be friends with these people because she wants to fit in. And I think that that's, totally normal. And so she just kind of says, okay. And it is interesting to see how there's this evolution towards, like incorporating more of the peacock into her life and based on places where she fits in.
Yeah. And it makes like something like that makes the fact that her son loves that color and is proud to love that color just even more poignant, because she grew up learning or unlearning to love that color. Yeah. One thing that I really noticed was that as she covers a huge range within the book in terms of her lifespan, and one of the things I noticed is that as she's getting older, she's becoming more and more wary and tired of having to confront racialized interactions, not necessarily racist, but definitely racialized. So whether it's someone greeting her with namaste or, just questioning her about her ethnicity or anything of that nature. I felt that wariness kind of very heavy on her. Yeah, that was just one observation.
Yeah, does she mention getting tired? Was it in the book that she talks about feeling tired? Or maybe it was in an interview I read with her, but of that very thing, like, I'm just tired of.
Yeah.
I think she definitely says it in reference to like people at grocery stores saying namaste to her. Completely
that might be worse.
Out of the blue. I definitely remember her saying that. And I think she mentions that a couple times too.
Yeah. Someone on her tenure committee also does it constantly. And
yeah. I think it goes to show like how what we think of as small interactions might actually have much deeper impact. The concept of microaggressions, particularly, it's harder to convey, but over time, it does take a toll on individuals. Yeah.
When I think about the namaste anecdote, in which I think it was one of her colleagues who repeatedly chose to greet her in that way, he wasn't really interested in who she really was.
Yeah.
He was much more interested in some sort of, why would somebody do that repeatedly? And I think one of the reasons is a refusal to see the person as anything that they actually are. He preferred to see her as he wanted to. And I think that that's a striking thing that from this book particularly. I was like, who does that? But then the answer is millions of people.
Yeah, it almost feels like there's something self-congratulatory for him in that's like, he's not really seeing her at all or listening to her say that she goes to a Methodist church. He's thinking, I connect so well with her because I understand where she comes from, when he's like totally misunderstanding it. But you get the sense that like, that's why that type of thing keeps happening, because this person thinks I'm connecting so well because I can't see beyond myself, but.
Yeah, very true. So another message that was really resonant for me was just like the environmental piece of it. I think that her writing in many ways is a noticing of the humans' responsibility towards the planet and to all of these wonderful, amazing things. And I had started to wonder about that the first time she mentioned like going snorkeling or like going to an aquarium or something like that. And I have such mixed feelings about aquariums or zoos even. I know there's lots of good that happens in those spaces, but also I just like the thought of large fish and other animals like being trapped in these artificial environments is causes me a lot of feelings. And so I was wondering when she would get to that, and I really, really appreciated all the different ways in which she kind of talks about our impact on the planet. And I was just wondering if any of that touched you or like made you think or differently.
I thought I put a bookmark in the part where she's talking. I don't know, this isn't how you say it, but axolotls. She's talking about how people or scientists do experiments on them and basically just keep cutting them up over and over again. And like, what happens the 95th time this happens? And it just reminded me of like the way that animals and people are treated historically in American culture. And I just saw like a parallel between that. And then like conservation is kind of skewed by this like mauling of the subject. But that's like what scientific pursuit often encompasses, is like dissecting the specimen. So yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say ultimately, but I just thought that was really horrific and interesting and like a good example of this weird tension that we have with the environment.
Yeah.
And the octopus too, where they bring the octopus and it really upsets her son. And then he never eats octopus again after that, which no, I couldn't either. But it's similar. Like we're using animals for our own benefit and don't really care if they're suffering.
Yeah, she talks about that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Lucy.
I was just saying with the cassowary bird too, when she's talking about like nobody knows this bird and they become really their population is so decreased, and she has this thought of like, well, I wonder if they were in a zoo, or we had zoos where animals like this were.
Mm-hmm.
It would build more empathy, but then she's explaining how animal like this can't be in a zoo because you can't build the correct environment for it. But that human interaction, like people aren't gonna see an animal unless they're forced to see it almost. They're not going to go out of their way to explore it, but if you put it in a zoo, they might learn about it.
Yeah. Well, one thing that stood out was the chapter on the whale shark and how she was studying them and swimming with them, but she also had that connection with the folklore that comes from the Philippines. So she had such a personal, like emotional response to like swimming with them. And there was one little spot where she talks about, I wasn't prepared to have, I lost my place. I'll find it. It was a really great little, I realized I was simply unprepared to submit myself so completely to nature, or rather humans' interpretation and preservation of nature, by adding 1.8 million pounds of sea salt to a giant tank of water so all these creatures could live and swim together for science, for entertainment, for spectacle, perhaps for a little of all three. And she just packs so much into such one page, like connecting her childhood with her present day like experience of swimming with them, and then adding in the folklore from the Philippines, and then this environmental impact on studying animals and looking at them for like as a spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
It's also interesting because it's like you're preserving this little slice of nature, preserving it like for how long? But what happens when the last specimen dies? Like it's still extinct. So it just seems like I agree with what Fatema said about just being like kind of weirded out by zoos and like see their importance, but also it's just kind of a weird contradiction.
Yeah. In the Octopus chapter, she even talks about how maybe the octopus know that, I think it's in that chapter where they know that the water or the oceans won't be livable for any animals in the future. And I was just, she says it much more beautifully than I am recalling, but that was very chilling for me as well. I've actually been learning a lot more about octopus as because there's been like some books and other things out, and just feeling a lot of ambivalence and guilt about eating them. And I don't tip I you know, I have no issues with eating animal products, but it was just for that. I think, yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to give it up. It just has me feeling a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah, the Octopus Chapter struck me because just like I think last week I had watched a documentary on them on Netflix, so it brought that to mind, and it made me really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you realize like there's the movie My Octopus Teacher where
Yep.
and you just realize like these creatures are so much more magnificent than a human could ever dare to be, and it just seems like, yeah, it would be very difficult to eat one especially after experiencing what her son experiences. But
also, if you think about it, some of the experiences she was having, like I've not had an up close and personal experience that I could describe of like a shark or an octopus, like in the wild. Like I can go to a zoo and see a flamingo or X, Y, and Z, but here I feel like they were just in the wild. She was finding herself in these spaces with these animals.
Yeah. Which was it, a bird or which animal was it that couldn't be held in captivity, that they would starve themselves instead and often will die within a year of
I think that was the ribbon eel.
Okay.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because she describes a lot of artificial environments that we, and a lot of the animals that she interacts with happens to be in these artificial environments. And so I was just thinking again about all the ways in which they might be affected by these environments. The ribbon eel is definitely one of those examples of like just nature's refusal to be imprisoned.
I rarely read two books at the same time. But what was crazy about reading World of Wonders was I was reading a book where the premise was it was shortly in the future and all the animals had died.
Ooh.
So I was engaging with those ideas.
Yeah.
Well, also, you put the book down and you go, the world is an amazing, beautiful place. Like, holy cannoli, you can't even begin to understand or imagine.
Yeah.
But in the background, there's this haunting kind of feeling of like, it's all about to be over, y'all. It's not something to really joke about, but it's just kind of something that made the book so sweet and tender, is that maybe my grandchildren will not have experiences like this. And that's why this record, another reason why this record is so precious.
Yeah,
like sorry, when she talks about was it 17 out of 22 children had never seen a firefly?
In her college students, yeah.
In an area where they have fireflies.
Yeah, that one stood out. And then also just talking about how they spend so much time indoors because they're on screens. Like that's not gonna go away. So 20 years from now,
I guess it also like something that she doesn't really get into is like how access to environment impacts how everyone experiences this. So like if a lot of these kids grew up in an urban environment, it would make sense. Like, yeah, there are fireflies, but like very few and far between. They're not going to see a whole field lit up with fireflies like someone who grew up in a rural area.
Yeah, I'm astounded. I split my time between Detroit and Ann Arbor. And in Detroit, I see very few types of birds, usually the little sparrows and a few slightly larger, these black birds. But in Ann Arbor, in my Ann Arbor home, I see all sorts. I see, robins and cardinals and the blue jays and a bunch of other ones. So to me, it's just surprising how such a small shift, because Ann Arbor does have a lot more greenery and a lot more trees and things. And so makes a difference. And I think about my nibblings who are growing up in Detroit, who are only exposed to those birds. So even if they were to spend time outside, they just wouldn't get that same experience or see that same biodiversity.
There was something I thought of when Jacob was talking about, just to go back to all the animals disappearing and like how, to read those two things. There's a bit, I think, with the dancing frogs where she talks about unnamed extinction. So just this idea that there are species that haven't even been named or discovered yet that will be extinct before they ever are. And that just kind of like, I don't know, I found that just really, and that's just a lot. That's like we're doing this so rapidly that we're going to destroy entire species that we never even knew that were there. Not that they're necessarily there for us to know that they're there. That's the other thing. I think there's a lot of hubris with being human, that like I can know this and see this, but just the idea that they would never even be discovered. It's just it's sad.
Does anyone know the story behind the mountains in Lake Superior, the mountain that she references that the
monarch?
Butterflies.
I
butterflies,
briefly,
yeah.
I don't know the exact history of it, but I did encounter it because I did like a monarch program for the library last year. And it I guess there was a mountain in the middle of Lake Superior that caused the butterflies to like veer a certain direction. And they still do that today, even though there's no obstacle there because it's like underwater now, I think.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what happened to the mountain, but it's underwater. That's amazing.
Yeah, and even like since this book's been published in 22, like now monarchs are even more scarce and endangered than they were in 2020.
Yeah, I was learning from my friend who is in environmental ecology that just planting milkweeds is going to help the monarch population. So they're just having even a few in your gardens. She lives out in Chicago, and she was talking about a campaign they were doing of going like door to door and giving people seeds for milkweed so that they can plant that. Yeah, which is very cool. It's like I had no idea, and now I know. So next year.
I think there's like a place in Detroit called Detroit A Bloom that they give out seeds.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, I love that.
You can also collect the seeds.
True, it's not illegal to harvest wildflower seeds in the wild.
Oh,
you can't like dig up the plant, but you can harvest the seeds.
That's cool.
That is really cool. Yeah. Wonderful. So, I guess this all leads me to a question of like, what sort of a relationship do you have with the earth or to nature? And what does that look like?
And I just got back from a short vacation where we were right on Lake Michigan, which was incredible. And just like the general sense of serenity and connectedness and calm, I felt being by water. And then how absent those feelings are in my daily life. It really is crazy the way that, or not crazy, it really is amazing how nature, how do I put this? Being in nature affects the feelings that I feel. It affects how I see myself and others. And it's just like such a powerful force. I'm kind of rambling, but like I think that's what I really mean to say, is that it's a powerful force. And it's insane that I don't get to, I really wish I could feel that way every day. And perhaps this has to do with being on vacation as well, of course, and doing whatever you want to do when you want to do it. But it's just like, how do I bring more of that into my everyday?
I think it's pretty easy to get like nature deficient in the lives that we live, like you have less and less time to carve out to do that. I mean, I know when I was little, like I was really lucky and I spent huge chunks of my childhood in the woods in New Hampshire by a lake and just like not, kind of set free. And I do think that helps to instill like this lifelong sense of wonder when you're in a place to discover those things, but I think that's really the difficulty, at least for me in like my life now, is being in a place to discover those things,
Yeah.
even
And
to take the time to look outside here. So
yeah, and I think too, like you get caught up in the day, you wake up early, you're doing your 9 to 5, you got meetings, you got errands, you have groceries, then all of a sudden it's 8 o'clock, you got to do dishes, do laundry, and you're just stuck. And those are all things you need to do. That's your life. But then when you do get that chance to like sit outside this morning and spend 2 hours reading a book and listening to the birds, and it takes you to a different place. You smell things, you see things. It does like lower my blood pressure, and just makes me, like Jacob was mentioning, like just the sense of calmness and serenity. And even if it's just for brief periods of like, having my morning coffee outside or going for a walk, and you see plants you didn't see the last time you were there because there's things are in bloom differently. So I just think there is a therapeutic sense for me personally. And I think for a lot of people, just like that being in nature. Like I was just up north last weekend, and there was this giant, we were on a small lake, and there was this giant weeping willow tree. It was just huge. And weeping willows are so mammoth and beautiful, and they look like a Muppet. They're so cool in and of it themselves. But there were all of these birds. And I was with a friend who was super into like birds, and she has all these bird call apps, and she was trying to like figure out which birds, because she hadn't seen those ones before. And we were seeing all kinds of birds that she hadn't seen before. And like a couple of them on the water, and we heard loons. It was just like, we're like, oh, and then the moon was full. We were just like enraptured and just like going nuts, because there was just so much like new stimuli, even though we were just like, up north and on a little lake. It was just, we had time because we were like, on vacation, to sit and just stare at the weeping willow like for 2 hours while we just like chatted and, drink our coffees. So, but it's hard to remember. It's hard to remember, not hard to remember what that feels like, but it's hard to remember to force yourself to take time and not just like be lazy and say, oh, I'm just going to, watch a show. But then if you don't watch a show and go for a walk, you're like, yeah. Like, so it's just, I played this mental game of forcing myself. Anyways. Sorry.
I'm kind of like Lucy. I was really lucky as a kid to live in a rural area, surrounded by woods. My parents had their own small business, which was on another property with woods surrounding it. So like I would go to work with them and hang out in the woods all day at home or when they were at work. So all the time I was outside. I basically wasn't even allowed inside in the summer. So I think that definitely forced me to appreciate nature. And then also just coming from a family that has a background of living this type of rural lifestyle and like farming. And yeah, my dad is super into nature and would always like Amy's dad take us out, and we maybe weren't always as jazzed about it as he was, but like I definitely really appreciate that as an adult now. And I just try to maintain that interest and love of nature. Like in my yard, I have planted a bunch of native plants, and I just like to go out and like see the bugs out there and see the birds. And like since I've expanded my yard to include all this diverse wildlife, I've seen more birds and more bugs than I've ever seen like since we moved here. It's been 2 years. But yeah, it's awesome. And I just like to just always maintain that wonder and engage with nature as much as possible.
I'm also very lucky in that I grew up in Bangladesh, in a village in Bangladesh, and so it was nature was everywhere. And my grandmother's land had everything from mango trees to jackfruit and lychees and all sorts of things. I had my own coconut tree, which was I had won it as the school prize. So I grew up really appreciating all these different plants. And one of the things that I teach a class on leadership, and part of the work is mindfulness and meditation. And the students get an assignment, a 7-week long journaling assignment. One of those weeks is dedicated to wonder. And one of the things that we prompt them, it's part of something called the mindful mindset developed by Dr. Abraham Mahalingam. And one of the things that, we ask students to think about is things that bring them a sense of awe, and to cultivate that. So every single day they have to spend just maybe 5 minutes writing about anything beautiful or inspiring, or like that filled them with awe that they saw, whether it's like a sunset, a piece of music, a painting, a natural scenery, or a sculpture, anything of that sort. And even spending just 5 minutes observing something and taking note of it, writing it down, would start to increase their sense of wonder about the world around them. And I've been trying to do that more now. Every morning when I'm writing, I mostly journal in the morning, and I find that, I'm like rushing and scatterbrained and writing all these thoughts and whatever. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to describe the scene around me. And it is like the things I hear, or based on the 5 senses, the things I hear and the things I see, and what I can smell around me. And suddenly I feel super grounded. And that's been my way of being like, I can actually hear birds chirping, and some of the bird calls I can recognize now, because I've spent time sitting around on my deck and listening and trying to figure out, you're the one who makes this sound, because I heard it and I was like, which bird is that? And it's marvelous. And I think that, I don't know, that practice has been really helpful. And after that, I feel this deep sense of calm, as you were describing, Jacob, of being at peace with things.
I really like that as a practice to model for students, because there are some people who don't have as big of a sense of wonder as others. Like some people don't notice the color of the grass or the shape of the clouds, or like how the light is like filling a room. Like I feel like I have extra sensory awareness, but some people don't pick up on all of those things, which is fine. So by being introduced to an exercise like that, you're kind of, they'll take that with them, when the course is over and that 1 week of wonder is done, they'll take that, and it won't be all the time, but if it'll give little pockets that they can put in everyday life, if they choose to, or it might just happen naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it's very occasional, like I've never been a big journaler daily. I can't keep to that practice, but I do have like a tiny book that's kind of like yep, I saw that book, and it's just things like, okay, a mother possum ran across the street in front of me with all of her babies on the back, and except one was like hanging off. And I just want to make sure that, I'm capturing how I felt in that moment somewhere. And so it's just a really random book filled with things like that. But, even that for me, it's just nice to have that record of those small interactions with nature.
Did anyone think of any plants or animals that, if they were to blend writing about nature, or even looking into a piece of nature and their own personal memory or personal history, was there any particular plant or animal that stood out to you?
I would say, sorry.
No, please, somebody else first.
Well, it's like very obvious since I already talked about how I did a program about monarchs, but milkweed, I love it. I have like a long history with it. When I was a kid, my grandma would take us walking and like pick it and make Christmas decorations or like whatever decorations out of the pods. And when I moved into my first house, I was like, the first thing I need, it's milkweed. I need to support those monarchs.
I thought I could write a mean chapter about being a house cat that's also an outdoor cat.
Okay.
If you see like a pet cat like hunt outdoors through like a window, or even just see them playing around with like catching bugs. I don't know. I was like, if this book was about, kind of my experience, there would be a house cat outside chapter.
Yeah, I would probably do, I could do a long chapter on tulips, because I'm from West Michigan, where they have the tulip festival every year. And we always had tulips, and tulips were everywhere. It was one of the first signs of spring for us out there.
I would do leeches. Yeah, because I grew up in a village in Bangladesh, and for the longest time we didn't have running water, so we would always like bathe in the pond. We had a family pond that people bathed in, and it had leeches, like especially during monsoon season, it would be terrible. So I have all these childhood memories of leeches on my skin, or like that would get on, and just being like kind of freaked out or terrified about them. And then also like how you actually like could kill leeches, because they were like particularly difficult to kill, but you solved them, right? That was one of the ways. And then possibly bringing in some histories around leeches, because leeches was used for medicinal purposes and all these other things in so many different places, and bringing that in as well. So that would probably be my animal.
I think I would be interested, like not in a specific animal, but in looking at animals that make sounds that you don't expect. And she kind of gets into that with that bird that makes that really strange sound. What makes me think about that is this summer I was in New Hampshire, and my dog was having this interaction, this conversation with an animal we could not tell what. And it turns out it was red foxes, but the sound was unlike anything that I have ever heard, that comes out of like this, almost like a screaming. It was really startling. And so I kind of did some research, and it was very much this like conversation going back and forth. And it just made me think about all these animals out there that you might hear the sound and not know what it is, or they keep it inside and they just use it occasionally. But when the sound doesn't match the animal, like I think with the bird in this book, she's kind of talking about that. So
yeah,
I'd be interested in that.
Because the sound is such that we can't even hear it, because
the cassowary.
Yeah.
Was there a chapter in here where a dog or her dad or two birds were communicating with each other?
The one where she was also communicating with the birds?
Oh yes, yeah. And then her husband didn't notice until like 10 years into their marriage.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see like what that is like, what the conversations like. Does she speak as a bird, or like is she using a different type of language? I don't know. It just sounded really interesting.
I feel like she now has to make that noise in an interview or something just so we can hear it. I mean, that might be an intrusion, but I want to know. Yeah, cool. We're coming up towards the top of the hour, so I just wanted to see if anyone had any last thoughts or anything that they wanted to touch on that they were not able to.
Huge shout out to the illustrator, Fumimini Nakamura. Oh my gosh.
Did she just do the cover, or did she do all of them?
I think all of them.
Gorgeously illustrated by. That's all I got.
Yeah, with illustrations by.
I'll admit that one of the I love seeing all the books that are going to be represented and discussed for this book group. But when this one, I look up all the titles as they come through, and this one came in, and I saw the cover, and I said, "Yep, I need to read that one," because the cover was so beautiful, and it has illustrations of the animals that are talked about in here. But just the style of it is just beautifully presented, and it just reminds me of like the scientific, like those simple like one color scientific illustrations you would see in like really old books about animals.
Yeah, the style is quite nostalgic.
Yeah.
I saw the cover and just was like, oh my gosh, that's gorgeous. And it drew me right in. And then the illustrations that kind of clinched it.
Yeah, I think the illustrations in the book might be the authors, because it says like on my back flap, cover illustration by Fumi
That's
Nakamura.
made me wonder if someone else did the name. Oh, it just said with illustrations by.
Yeah, so it says two different things. It's hard to know.
On the title page thing, it says illustrations by.
Well, they're beautiful either way.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, it's a beautiful book into a glimpse of nature. And I think a good takeaway is just if you are allowed to have a moment of nothingness, wonder about something, go outside, look for a firefly, just
Yeah,
You're
that's
on
a
the way-
lovely
if
story.
you're in like bad traffic, you're on the way to somewhere, you're stuck in traffic, look out the window, look up at that tree, see what's in it. I mean, that's your 30 seconds of,
Yeah.
or the sunshine that's on your face right now.
There's a lot of sunshine in my face now. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us for this discussion. Next month, we're reading No No Boy. It's a novel written by Japanese American writer John Okada. So it's an older book. It's from 1957. So I'm kind of very excited to engage with something that is a little less modern, but nonetheless very well done. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you again for putting this book in our hands. They're always such good choices. So thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye.
You too.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much.